just won your club contest. It's now time to move on to the area contest. And you may be in a room like this, or you may be in a different room altogether. You may have the actual chance to use the stage. You might even use a microphone. Many of these things are things that we normally don't use in a club setting. So are you truly prepared for your contest speech? Tonight I'm going to talk about 3 aspects on a speech that can affect your final result as based upon what the judges believe because of the room, the stage, and the microphone. Let's start off with the room. If you take a look at the room that we're in right now, basically it is narrow and it's deep. It may not be as deep as other rooms, but the situation you have right now is rectangular. You have a narrow front, it goes deep in the back. If we use the back where you gave your presentation, for example, we have a smaller working area. Here I have more room, I can go all the way back to the wall. So there's plenty of room in that respect, but there's certain aspects that you have to take into account. But not all rooms are like this one. You may have a square room where the dimensions are more equal all the way around. You may be in a situation where you're in an amphitheater, where you're at the base and everybody's seated up around you. So how do you handle those particular situations? Let's take, for example, this room. It's narrow and deep. What are some of the advantages I have? I can make fairly good eye contact with everybody in the room. I don't have to worry too much about my vocal variety. I know that as long as the person in the back can hear, the person in the front can hear, I will have to adjust, for example, if I have to do a stage whisper, so that somebody in the front can hear it as well as somebody in the back. So those are some of the things I have to consider. What are some of the disadvantages that I have? My stage area might not be as big as I would like. If I'm using a prop, and I will use several tonight, and you will see how it can be affected by whether or not you have a prop or not. Do I have enough room to do certain things? Or am I just going to be planted like a tree and never move? There's one other problem that you occur in a room like this with no stage, and that is your gestures. I don't know how many of you consider this, but when everybody is sitting on the floor, it changes your gestures. Your gestures aren't in a box. Your gestures actually are more in a triangle. Your gestures actually go outward like so. Because if I'm doing something here with my hands, somebody in the back may not be able to see it because of the row of heads that are in the way. So when you look at your gestures now have to almost make a V shape. Or you start off shoulder height and higher so that everybody can see them, whether they're sitting in the front row or in the back. How many of you have ever thought about that when you're setting up your presentation? Do you have a habit of keeping your hands down, whether it's in a contest speech or in a speech before the group, and people in the back cannot actually see what you are doing because of the barrier set up by the lectern, or because of the fact that people are in front of you? You'll notice that some people are sitting along the table, and in the case over here, we have some people who have actually moved away from the table itself, and that will affect how well they can see certain things. You have to take that into consideration. But again, not all rooms are like this. What happens if this is the room? Now, my room is wide and shallow. What's the difference? Vocal variety is a little bit easier because everybody's a little bit closer. I do have one problem that I didn't have before. That is eye contact. Eye contact with this person and eye contact with that person is a lot more difficult. Gestures might be a little easier, although everybody would have to be able to turn around to see me, and they probably would be in the case of a contest. But I'm just using this as an example. Again, how does it change? Maybe if you want to do eye contact, you'll make movement part of your presentation. So I can do eye contact and then turn slightly so I can still see the rest of the room. And then I'll move on to making another point, and I'll move over to this side of the room, make eye contact, and then turn slightly so I can see everybody. And it allows me to do eye contact throughout the entire room. This does cause one problem. When I'm here in the center, my vocal variety is different than when I'm at one wing or the other. Because again, if I have to do a stage whisper in this particular location, I have to make sure that the people in the back can still hear me. So as I move, my vocal variety will change. I've had the pleasure of speaking in an amphitheater. It's an interesting situation because normally when you speak, you look like this. When you speak in an amphitheater, you have to keep yourself from always looking like this. Hi, I can see the people in the back. So you have to get used to your room. One of the things that I find that most Toastmasters will not do is they will not go to their room until it's actually time for them to go and find out what their order is. And so they have no idea until they get there and they're like, oh, okay, well, here's the situation for the room. Go early. Find out what the room is like. Find out if you're going to be in a narrow and deep, if you're going to be in a rectangular, if you're going to be in an amphitheater, or if you'll be in a situation where you're in a wide and shallow room. And then think about everything that you do in your presentation and wonder, is there something I have to do differently in the way I move or set up my props so that I can continue to have the freedom of movement, make sure that my gestures are such that everybody can see them, and I can still do the vocal variety where I can go very softly and people can hear in the back, or very loud to where everybody can hear throughout. As I said, the room is only one part. The second part is the stage. Just out of curiosity, Madam District Governor, and you can probably answer this one. Normally, when we have a stage for the district contest, can you tell me what kind of stages they normally have for us?
Usually it's a wooden stage that's built specially for the event rather than a fixed-in set stage.
I want to explain something about most hotels, because that's normally where we hold the district conferences. At least in the United States, I don't know about Europe, but in the United States, you have situations where you may be on a dais, which is a small square where you're raised. You may be on a stage, as you say, it's a one piece, normally made out of wood. Or, and this is the one that I most commonly have seen within the United States, you're on these small square blocks that are easy to move, so they can move it from one room to another. And then when they put them together, they're on casters, which are wheels, lashed together so that they don't move. But it's easy to move them until they get them into place, and then they lock them down. And each one creates a different situation. First, the dais. One of the things you have to understand about a dais is not big. It's at most 2 meters by 2 meters. It's very small. So if you have a prop and it's part of your presentation, that now takes away from your speaking area. So it may have to be off the dais so that you can make it effective. If that's the case, one thing you want to make sure about is you know exactly where the edge is. You're laughing. I have seen people fall off of 6-foot diets. It's not fun to be in the middle of a speech and you miss step and there's nothing there and you're tumbling over. A stage is better because it's bigger. A stage is better because it's bigger. It's uniform throughout, which is one of the nice things. Now you have to take into account every time you step, you will hear that wooden sound as you go across the stage. This can affect your presentation, and you may have to take that into consideration. Do you move a lot? Do you jump up and down? Do you run? Do you sprint? Do you do something that's physical on stage that can affect your presentation? Because now all of a sudden you have this sound that was never scheduled in your speech. No matter, I'm looking through my script, I don't have anything where I'm supposed to go. And in the nick of time, I don't want to have to figure out, oh, that's what I'm going to avoid. So, one of the things you have to worry about within your stage is just make sure what it sounds like. Now I'm saving the last one, the small squares on the wheels on purpose, and there's a reason for it. If you've ever had to deal with these little squares sitting on wheels, you have to understand something. It's not like a leg or 4 legs underneath where it stands. It actually has a little bit of movement to it. Here's the other part. Not all of them are built the same. How is that affecting your presentation? After a while, the wood that they use, and they're primarily made out of wood on top, starts to wear out. Primarily in the center. So what happens is that as you're walking along, you will actually feel yourself dip. I mean, where you're talking, you're walking along and you feel like this. You think I'm kidding, I'm not. It feels like that. Everybody else sees this. They see you moving normally. But you literally will feel like you're dipping the entire time, especially if you keep hitting the centers, because the center ends up being softer than the edges. Here's another little secret that you need to know about when they put those little squares together. Sometimes they rub against each other because the wheels are maybe a little bit different. And what happens is that you walk on it and you'll hear it. Yeet! 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 I'm in the middle of a presentation, and now Martin Luther King stepped up to the lectern to make that wonderful speech 50 years ago by starting off by saying, I have a dream. David Brooks, the 1990 world champion of public speaking, talked about the night before his presentation. He and another Toastmaster actually went up and they tested out their stage as they went through their presentation. They each took turns. One would get up, speak for a little while, sit down, and the other one would get up and speak for a little while and sit down. But one of the things they found out was there was this one location where, for whatever reason, the wheel had fallen off, or there was no wheel at all. So if you actually stepped in it, that particular location, you could literally drop a good 3 or 4 inches. And there was another spot that he found where it would make that squeak. And at that point, he and the other Toastmaster worked very hard to figure out exactly where these minefields were on the stage. And with it charted out, they knew exactly where to go and where not to go. Now, for their fellow competitors, they were willing to tell them that they ought to try going to something. No, we won't go. So how does the stage change the effect? Right now, I'm on the floor. As I stated earlier, my situation is my gestures have to be like so. So I don't hit the light. This is my temporary stage. Notice the difference. I can actually make gestures to my knees, and you can probably still see it. It's very easy for me to make any gesture out to any part where people can see it. And if I was sitting at the corner, or standing at the corner, or standing on the side, those are some of the things that I have to take into account. I know that I can do more gestures when I'm on a stage of some sort, and it doesn't have to be this high. I'm probably 3/4 of a meter off the ground. It doesn't have to be high, but it can be enough to make a difference in your presentation. I saved the best for last, and that is microphones. In Poznan, I never got to see any of the educationals I wanted to because one of my members had qualified for 3 contests. She was in both of the English contests and she was in the German contest. And when it was time for her to do her check through of everything, she asked me to be there. So I was there, I was giving her the advice about the rooms and such. And then it was time to do the sound checks. If you went to Poznan, you can probably remember that most people talked about how horrible the microphones were. For whatever the reason, they were offset. I have no idea. I'm not technically savvy in regards to microphones. However, one of the things that I did was I had her get up on stage, and I knew that she did a jump in her presentation. So I made her actually do the jump. I had her do a stage whisper. I made her shout, because she has a shout portion within her presentation as well. I had people stationed in the back corners. And when I was happy with the way it worked, I said, fine. Then the next person said, oh, wait a minute. Can you do the same thing for me? Okay. So I figured, okay, one more, we'll go through this. And so I made them go through the same thing. Can you do me as well? So I ended up doing all the speakers. I was about to leave when all of a sudden the Toastmaster walked up to me and said, who are you? I said, I'm Rudy Morales, I'm from Stuttgart. How can I help you? He says, I'm the contest chair, you're my sergeant at arms. What? Oh, no. I didn't get a chance to volunteer for anything. No, you don't understand. They don't understand how to set up the microphones. You do. You're going to have to set up the mic. And so I did. And then after I went through the process with everybody in that particular contest, all of a sudden she introduced me to the German contest chair who said, oh, you're the one she was talking about. Okay, I ended up doing literally 5 of the English contests and I think 3 or 4 of the German contests. So I never saw any of the educationals because I was focused more on making sure that the microphones are okay. Here's certain things that you have to understand about microphones. There's different types of microphones, and unfortunately I wasn't able to bring mine with me, so I'm going to have to improvise using the gavel. You may get a handheld mic. Problem with a handheld mic is the following. It's in your hand. It means that you now gesture with one hand. You could trade off, and this takes practice, but you can actually do this with one hand and switch over to the other one. You need to know where your mic is. Daryl, you've done interviews. What happens when the microphone's here or maybe here? If it's here, it sounds like you're eating the microphone. If it's down here, you sound like this, and it's very difficult to hear the presentation. So you have to find a location in between where it sounds right. We are starting to go to lavaliers. What that is a system where you hook it up and you put it to the back of your belt or something, and then you clip it to something in the front so that people can hear you. Ladies, this has been a disadvantage for you and an advantage for you. First, the advantage. All microphones are a benefit to women more so than men. Most women have trouble projecting. I know you, Madam District Governor, probably are happy that you still have a voice because you don't have to scream in a large room because of a microphone. I happen to have a voice that carries. There's probably people a couple of cities over that can probably hear me. I can't help it. I talk in an outdoor voice, as they would say. But a microphone is a benefit for the ladies. The negative is now you have to wear something for the microphone. I remember being in a contest one time when we had a young lady who was dressed for the event that night. She ended up holding the receiver in one hand and the clip in her hand because there was just no place to put it on her dress. The other type of microphone that we use lately has been the one that goes behind your ears and then it brings a microphone to the front, which is fine, but you sort of look like this, okay? Which is okay once you get used to it. Now, let me give you a hint. If you're not the first speaker, chances are the mic will not be set where you want it to. Because the first person is going to have it here, the next person may have it here, the next person may have it here. So you need to know exactly, okay, based upon this, if I'm looking, okay, that's the right place. You may even want to sound check before you go up on stage. Because that particular piece is flexible. And depending on whether or not the person before you had to move it in one way or another, can affect how it's going to sound for you. Because you may end up in a situation similar to talking like this versus talking like this. Because you did not take into account where that microphone's set up. And the winner is you. Why? Because not only did you have the speech that had the words, the gestures, the vocal variety, but now you have done the preparation to know about the room, the stage, and the microphone. Don't be intimidated by those who've been there before just because you haven't done it before. If you get a chance to do a presentation outside of this club, the dimensions of the location you're at might be different. Possibly. Are you ready for that? Are you prepared for that? If you do, you'll be holding the trophy.